Welcome back to another episode of Outsourced Alpha. Thank you for tuning in once again, and very excited about today. Before we get into it, just a quick story. About 3 years ago, I'm in LA somewhere around Tech Week, getting into an Uber, and who steps out the back door but the one and only Yoni Tuchman. And I think the reason why I wanted to start with that, this man is ubiquitous, very polarizing in the private funds and alt space. And so as far as him being fashionably late for the event that I was leaving early during, which is par for the course for me, probably cracking a joke and smiling and being very witty along the way. But in all seriousness, if you cross paths with Yoni in the past, you'll know that he is certainly having a gravitational pull. He works with a lot of private funds, ranging from emerging to the institutional sponsors of the world. And I'm excited to have him today. So with that being said, Yoni Tuchman, welcome to Outsource Alpha. And I'd love to get a quick version of yourself, what your practice looks like, anything you want to share to kick it off.
That's a great intro story, Derek. I need to say a couple of things in my introduction. First of all, long-time listener, first-time caller. Super excited to be on with you, Derek. I'm legit excited. It's a very low bar that gets me excited. Okay, I'm joking. That story about my bringing you your Uber, right? It's because everything is value add over here. Everything. You need a car, I will bring it to you, right? I will step out of the car and you will step in right at that moment. I'm a fund formation lawyer. I'm a partner at DLA Piper here in sunny Los Angeles. Clients are all over the globe. We are a big global law firm, but we happen to spend a lot of time on the West Coast. I work with emerging managers. Now, define emerging manager. I have my own definition for it. Okay, I have actually two definitions for it. My first definition is any fund manager that has aspirations, okay, to grow. And that's essentially an emerging manager. Now, I know if you open up a textbook and try to define emerging manager, that's not the definition. An emerging manager will probably be defined as someone raising their first fund, or maybe one of their first 3 vintage funds. Maybe you'll define it as a manager that has more high net worth investors rather than institutional investors. And so they don't have a lot of negotiating, which tends to be what happens when you have institutional investors will hire law firms to negotiate. Emerging managers, people think often will just have friends and family, high net worth, some family offices that kind of sign. It's an easier process. I think all those things are true and they're all fair definitions. But if you scope out and define emerging manager the way I like to think of it, which is a manager with aspirations to grow, then aren't we all emerging at some point in some way? So when you introduced me, which I thank you for, and I agree with it, work with emerging managers to institutional funds, all true. But I like to think that even institutional funds should view themselves as emerging. Because until they've tapped out and they're not looking to grow and they're not looking to, evolve, they're still emerging, right? And so the mindset of an emerging manager in the classically defined term, and sorry to go on a long answer to this question you haven't asked yet, like the way a classically defined emerging manager, they're like, how can I build this better? How can I build this optimally? Both in terms of the structure, how I structure my fund, and how do I structure the entities, the constellation of entities, 2, 3 entities will surround my fund, right? From a tax perspective, from a regulatory perspective, how do I optimize the build of this thing I'm building? Telescope in, use a magnifying glass to get in, right? Get deeper into the terms of the fund itself. So we have a structure optimized for tax, for regulatory, having in mind who my investors are likely to be, my optimization, their optimization. These are not trade-offs. These are things where everyone can win. And now dig into your fund terms, the technology in your fund. What's the best technology? in every way for every term of my fund. The best key person provision, the best investment period definition, right? The best waterfall. Again, not as a series of trade-offs where horse trading GP on the one side, LPs on the other side necessarily, but what's the best way to say things, right? Processes. What's the best process? I have my structure. I have my terms, my documents. Now there's like some stuff that has to happen. Like people have to review stuff. They have to sign stuff. There's filings. There's closing email. There's like little things, but a lot of them that have to happen. Let's optimize that. Let's make that efficient. Let's make that friendly, right? So an emerging manager, classically defined, is approaching all of these things with like a brand new set of eyes. Like, I haven't done this before. How do we set this up in all these ways? The structure, the terms, the language, the process. You may be on fund 8 or fund 9, but have you really perfected it? Is there nothing to be improved in terms of all the different ways that you're interacting with your investors? There's always improvement. And even if it was perfect in fund 7, there's always new thinking that's evolving in the marketplace. So why don't you pick up on that and maybe even improve the perfect, right? So I think everyone's an emerging manager, and if they're not, they should think of themselves in that way. And that's what we do. Like we're not like we're not like service providers. Like we're not like selling paper and type, for like money. That's not what we do. We're partnering with growth-minded builders of investment funds. And we're getting in with them and we're conceiving of how they could optimize the whole gamut, their structures, their documents, their terms, their processes, and their back office. Not that we're run the back office, but who are the partners they could bring in to make things efficient, right? Who's got the best technology? Who's got the best, bedside manner with their investors and whatnot. So that's a very long-winded, and I apologize for the long-winded way of answering your question. This is what we do. This is what we do.
Yeah, no, and we've known each other for a while. And what I've seen across those that are successful as an emerging manager and those that perhaps hit a bit of a footfall has a lot to do with the ones that treat their trusted advisor relationships, like a DLA and yourself or Juniper, what have you, as a commodity. And their analysis is who's the cheapest, who has the most templates I can get to market quickly as possible. But the reality of it is that exposure shows up, to your point, at every step of the way: the technology, the provisions, and the devils are in the details, and the details are in the agreements, right? And so I guess with that being said, when you think about fund formation as a whole, what else goes into it with regard to negotiating with LPs and handling tax work? Because there is a much larger body of work to handle. And of course, you're not doing it by yourself, but walk me through the conversation you're having with an emerging manager for the first time, just to get their head on straight and see the bigger picture behind it.
I say this till I'm blue in the face. I say this, you can't stop me from saying this enough. There's a process here. There's a process. There's 3 steps. You design everything. Just design it. Don't build it yet. Don't close it yet. Just design it thoughtfully, carefully, slowly. You know how long that takes? A couple days. We're not saying, pause your life, detour from your goals to muck, to wallow in the muck of design. No, forceful, energetic. Spend a few hours thoughtfully designing your path for this fund in every way, right? And then you have this very efficient road that you've laid, and then you proceed. So what I say to every emerging manager or every manager day one is, let's take a step back and let's build a roadmap for where we're trying to get to Let's build a path how we're going to get there. Before we take one step, let's just have a map. Okay. That's, I think, the most important thing. Does that answer your question? I can elaborate on that a lot.
No, but it's good to have just a set of first principles for people to come back to and questions to be asking, and maybe to go into a little bit deeper into a few of the themes that our clients are seeing across the legal landscape. And I'll lay these out. We can take these in any which way you'd like. The first is regulatory, and what I mean by that is you have on one hand the rules are changing as a narrative. And then there's this discourse on, well, that's true, but the enforcement posture is also changing. So trying to balance those two. The second of which is retail. So how much has the quote unquote democratization of private capital actually reached your client base? And the third of which being international. And, there's optionality, but you expand that surface area of where you're operating and there's a lot more complication coming into it. So those are a few themes that have come up. I wonder if you wanted to riff on any of those.
Retail, international. What was the third one?
The third one is just compliance related to, and balancing between what we would consider to be, the enforcement posture and the stringency of it versus the rules are changing and we need to be aware of those. So there's two different things at play.
Yeah. Compliance, retail, international. I have I think a very contrarian view on compliance. Real and everything. People ask, what are the trends you're seeing? What's changing? Where are things headed? Everyone wants to know like that crystal ball. And they'll ask that in different contexts. And all the contexts you raised, they'll say, compliance, like what's the next thing in compliance? Like how are things changing materially? And I'll say, I always answer the same way. I've been doing this fund formation for like 22 years. Okay. Something like that. And do you know what's changed like thematically, like big picture, tectonic plates sort of shifts over 22 years?
Don't know.
Nothing. Nothing. The way I cut my teeth in this industry when I was a baby lawyer in Manhattan, before I was as gray in my beard as I am now, nothing's changed. We are training. I am teaching the craft, the art of fund formation to associates today the exact same way I learned. Because again, maybe I'm missing something, right? Things do not change that much. They don't. They change on the margin. They change on the periphery. Every new administration changes something because there's a tone set at the top. A new SEC chairman. Things change. I'm not saying that the Trump administration, nothing's changed since Biden to Trump. Things do change. But like, thematically, in a way that really impacts your business that I want to like shout from the rooftops? No. You're not going to defraud anyone under Biden. You're not going to defraud anyone under Trump. You're going to run a tight ship under anyone's organization, administration. No matter who's SEC chairman, you're going to make sure that you're not, you're in compliance with 10b-5. You're not omitting to disclose in your disclosure. You're not misstating things. These things don't really change. Now, again, you want to like focus in on marginal important things. Yeah, we could focus in on the marginal important things, but I just want to like just take a step back, just like let people relax a little bit. Like the world is not changing. It's just not, and it hasn't changed in the quarter of a century that I've been doing this. But things do change, like compliance stuff, right? Like, there was a no action letter that came out last year, changed a lot. It changed a lot in terms of compliance when it hit 2 of your 3, right? Compliance and retail, right? So when was it, like, I don't know, 10 years ago? I don't know. When did the 506C, was that like part of Dodd-Frank? I remember. It was like about 10 years ago, I want to say, right?
Yeah, I was raising 506C funds back in 2016. So yeah, it's been a while.
call it a decade, right? That was like, if you were like charting like the like changes in the landscape of fund formation, like that was a change. That was like, like that thing. If you imagine like the hospital, I don't know what it's called. Like that thing moves, right? Because until then, every fund you were raising was a private placement. And I would tell clients, unless you have a pre-existing relationship with a prospective investor, or you purchased that pre-existing relationship through a placement agent, you shouldn't be talking about your fund. What's a pre-existing relationship? How you define it? No, okay. And then it raises all these thorny questions that don't really have good answers, right? Because it's all facts and circumstances, right? So 506C came along and said, you know what? You actually can shout from the rooftops about your funds. You could talk to people as prospective investors with whom you do not have any iota or inkling of a pre-existing relationship. And as long as you satisfy these, you jump through these hoops, you're okay. And so we started having some funds do that. But it was like, real funds don't do that. Only like the needy funds who can't raise money the old-fashioned way do 506C. But then that kind of fell away, and people were like, no, this is a legitimate way of raising money, but it still had these like strings attached, which I'm not getting into, but we can. Like there were these strings attached. You have to verify, you have to make sure that your investors are accredited, can't just take their word for it. But then 1 year ago, there was a no action letter that completely, in my opinion, not completely, like substantially mitigated or severed, to keep within the analogy or the metaphor, those strings that are attached to 506C. And now every client I talk to, whether they're emerging in the classical sense or they're emerging in my sense of growth oriented, I'll ask them, do you want to raise this new fund the old fashioned way or the new way, 506C? Not really new, it's a decade old, right? But like the newer riff on that, which is now a year old, where you have substantially less downside in doing this public private placement. A lot of people haven't thought of it because they just do what they've done, and you do what you've done. And I was raising funds for 20 years, and 10 years before 506C was birthed. And so I didn't know about it. But I never did it because I always do things the way I did it. But things evolve. So stick, keep up with the times. And so now that's like a way that really access a more retail crowd, if that's what you're looking for, in a much easier way, right? Within the rules. And that's like, I think, like my favorite example of a regulatory change that allows you a lot more freedom than it did even 1 year ago, right? Certainly 10 years ago was one blip in the change. Last year, another blip to make it even easier. And that's an example. Like I want everyone to think about stuff like this. International, who are your investors? How big a fund are you raising? Okay. If you're raising, I don't want to put numbers because like people have like different comforts at different thresholds. I don't want to like presuppose your comfort. But what I'll say is there's a point of diminishing returns. If you're taking money, and by the way, let me just pause for a second. Nothing that I'm saying is legal advice. Okay. I just want to say that, like, talk to your lawyer. I'm not giving any legal advice. I will not stand by. I will deny I ever said this. Okay. I will deny the podcast. But at a certain point, like, there are more or less rigorous ways to handle like non-US fundraising, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're raising, I'll just give you an easy example. If you're raising $50 million, okay, and you're going to have most investors from the US, but you're also going to have an investor from one country. I won't mention any countries, right? You're going to have a handful of investors, a handful of different countries. What are you going to do about that? Are you going to go hire lawyers in those handful of countries, even if you're a firm like ours, like DLA, that has fund lawyers in those jurisdictions? Are you going to take legal advice because you have one investor from one jurisdiction? what's the size of that memo that you're going to generate to take that investor's money? Is there a more cost-effective way? Are there ways, for example, of like reverse defensible to rely on what we call reverse solicitation, right? There used to be a commercial when I was a kid. I remember being sick at home and I saw this commercial. It was on like daytime TV all the time. It was for this technical school. If you wanted to learn a new trade, like you wanted to become a mechanic, it was called, I think, Apex Tech. That's what it was called. That's in my head. It was like, and the tagline was, the guy would be in his shop, coat, walking around the cars and stuff. And he'd say, you look into the camera, you go, now I can't call you. So pick up the phone and call Apex Tech. That's what he'd say. Okay. So I say like, I can't like, that's like reverse solicitation. Like the LP says like the GP says, I can't call you. So you pick up the phone and call us, but if it's a legitimate reverse solicitation, right? LPs found you. However they found you, and they're interested in making an investment, right? Like, do you need to go through all the hoops from every jurisdiction that you're bringing an investor? So I would say like things, if you're raising a lot of money, right, and you have a big war chest to do things in the most buttoned up, most, complicated way, there's certainly a place for that. But a lot of funds, I think that's overkill for them. There's probably more efficient ways to do it.
Yeah, no, very well said. I remember a lot of these daytime. I remember the Le Cordon Bleu Institute and ITT Tech and all of that. Sometimes I wish I became a chef, but here we are. I would have been awful at that, by the way. So I guess another question that comes up quite a bit is, this creativity and this engineering of funds. And a lot of the smaller emerging funds, or even the spinoffs of institutional funds, they come in with ideas and notions that they can spin up evergreen funds, open-ended funds, because there is some sort of structural advantage to that. But the question that I have is, with so many funds doing that, from some of the largest asset managers in the world to the new emerging funds, is there any arbitrage there, or has all the arbitrage been arbitraged away because everybody's following the same script? What is your opinion of the structuring and some of the newer strategies that are coming out?
It's actually, it's a great question, because one of the themes I talked about, like 506C is a theme. There's a few themes that I jotted down before this call in case you asked me this about different themes. But one theme I think is like the evergreen fund. I do think that is a theme. Now, again, to come back to my own analogy, it's not a tectonic shift. This isn't like a huge earthquake, but we're seeing more. I mean, I'm seeing more of them. Like someone in the past may have just raised a PE fund because that's, you raise a PE fund, but now they're like, wait a second, I may not want to part with these assets, which brings me to, I'm going to digress for a second. Let's come back to this. Another theme is like GP-led secondaries. That's another theme. That's like different than it was 20 years ago. Like when I started out, I'm teaching associates now the same way I learned, but like GP-led secondaries, evergreen PE funds, these are two things that are new, I would say, right? These are new relative to when I was, started out as a baby lawyer. But coming back to what we talking about? Not the GP led. Sorry, not the.
Oh
GP
no, evergreen.
Yeah, evergreen. Sorry, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Coming back to the evergreen funds. The thing with an evergreen fund is that I don't think there's an arbitrage that is lost. I think it's not even out of arbitrage. I think the prism to look at this is, what's the best type of vehicle to hold the type of asset that you're going to acquire? And the answer may be an evergreen fund. That doesn't mean that, well, everyone's done an evergreen fund, so I'm not going to. If an evergreen fund works for you, if that's the optimal, coming back to me, something you design it, and before you even design it, like the first step of design is like, what are we building? Like, are we building an evergreen fund, or what assets are you holding? Who are your investors? Who are you as a GP? And does this fund have a set life where it will be wound down, or doesn't it? If it does, and it's just gonna be wound down after 10 years, whatever, it's a PE fund. It's like a VC, like I say PE fund, like in the expansive way. It could be a real estate fund, it could be a venture fund, but it's a PE fund. It's a closed-end vehicle where if you've seen one, you've seen them all. And I know that insults people sometimes. I don't mean to disparage, like, what? I'm not doing cutting edge stuff. No, you are. But like at the end of the day, a fund is a fund. I get this question also sometimes. I'm raising a venture fund. I want to work with someone who only raises venture funds. Or I'm raising a PE fund, or fill in the blank. I want a lawyer or a fund admin that only they specialize in that aspect. I believe there is a place for that. If I were having surgery on this right hand, I would want to go to a hand surgeon, right? I wouldn't want to go to a general surgeon who does all kinds of things. I want someone now, but let's face it. I want to be honest. None of what we're doing is surgery. It's just not. Like, surgery is one thing. Go to the hand specialist, okay? You're raising a fund. I would say this. Don't go to the hand specialist. Go to the guy who knows, or the gal. Go to the team that knows funds the best, that has the broadest, deepest knowledge of funds. That means venture, growth equity, private equity, real estate, credit, fund to fund, hedge funds, all of these things, the 7 types of funds I just mentioned, don't ask me to repeat them, but the 7 types of funds I just mentioned, right? They have, all 7 of them have in common with the other 7, 90% identical, and 10%, if I'm being generous, of DNA that differentiates, a venture fund from real estate fund, a PE fund from a credit fund. I will stand by this. They are 90% identical. And there's 10% of DNA that makes them very different, but it's only 10%. And there are cases where your knowledge of the real estate fund business and industry will inform your venture fund. Not every venture fund, but there will be a venture fund. There will be a PE fund where you're going to be benefiting because you know more than just venture, more than just PE. I can give you examples, but that philosophically, I think it's a really important point. But I'm digressing because it's so much fun to talk to you there.
No, all good.
I'm digressing. Open-ended funds. I want to come out. I wasn't trying to avoid the question. So if you've seen one closed-end fund, you've seen them all. And again, there's that 10% of DNA that makes them very different from one another. But ultimately, at their core, they are so similar. An open-ended fund, an evergreen fund is different. I like to say that an evergreen fund is less like a fund, less like a closed-end fund, and more like a family office. Have you ever seen a family office? Have you ever seen the structure and the documentation for family office? I have. And I've seen many of them. And what I say is, if you've seen one, you've seen one. No two are alike. There's not like the NVCA or the ILPA of family offices, at least not that I'm aware of. Okay. There's no like book. These are the market terms. This is the give and take, the push and pull between GP and LPs in an evergreen PE fund. Maybe we should write it, but I don't think it's writable yet because I don't think there is enough. I don't think there are enough of them, enough investors, enough GPs doing them to make a market out of it. And so it ends up that every time you're designing one, you're really thinking from first principles. You're really thinking like, what are we building here? And you'll analogize to different things. And you'll say, like, I like to start with the PE fund. Okay, you're raising a fund. You think it may be evergreen. Okay, let's start with the PE fund. Let's start with a typical vanilla closed-end PE fund. What about that bothers you? What stress test the PE fund? What about a PE fund, the closed-end PE fund, doesn't sit right with you? Identify it. And then let's solve that problem. It could be that you end up with a PE fund where you chop off the end term and it just lived forever. But till that point, it's a PE fund, right? That's like, I want to raise a PE fund. I want to raise it for a year. I want to have a 5-year investment period. I want to get cash and carry out when I exit an investment. Okay, you're describing a PE fund, but I don't want to have to shut this down after 10 years. Okay, let's chop off the end. Okay, maybe it's a 15. Maybe there's no end. Maybe your investors are okay with that. Maybe there's some other, other way that they get liquidity or they're comfortable, living with the term that you have. But like, is that an evergreen fund? Yeah, it's an evergreen fund. It looks identical to a PE fund, except till you get to the end of 10 years and it looks very different. But we added by deleting, like add by omission, cut off the end and then it lives forever or for a longer period of time. That raises liquidity issues more than any other issue. And so you have to deal with those if it is a problem. But what I'm saying is it all gets back to design the fund intelligently and thoughtfully, right? It's not like you don't give a client or you as a fund manager, you're not ever given a binary set of choices. Like, okay, here's what you can do, Derek. You want to raise a fund? You want a 10-year fund or a hedge fund? Which one? It's like, it's not like, let's start with one of those two models and then identify specific things about the model that you don't like and fix those specific things. And that's why I say, you've seen one evergreen fund, you've seen one. They're no two alike because everyone designing one is trying to solve for something which may be different than what the other guy's solving, or they may choose a different way to solve it.
Sure. I mean, we see a lot of funds come to us with a beginner's mind, and they tend to be the most successful in that they're asking us, what is our advice based on some large sample size of thousands of clients we work with? We've seen successful raises, we've seen unsuccessful raises, and they're asking the right questions and they're willing to acknowledge their blind spots. So I guess the question for you is, what are some of the preconceived notions or behaviors that somebody comes to you with that might actually set them up for failure rather than success early on?
Oh, it's an interesting question. I don't know. I think luckily and very fortunate, I think we have a lot of similar clients, the same clients, and a lot of clients that have similar mindset. People who are coming to us, I think are similarly minded. Like they're looking for advice. I'm trying to think if there are examples of clients that have come to us with preconceptions, with rigid ways of thinking that we had to talk them out of. I'm sure there are. Maybe here's one example. This comes up once in a while. I could think of a couple examples where a client came and they want to do two things. I'll give you like one example. Like they want to invest in other funds. We call that a fund of funds. And they also want to invest in startups. We call that a venture fund. Okay. And they want to do it in one vehicle. And they were like, yeah, we're raising this fund and we're going to do two things out of it. So I'll raise with them. Boy, I get it. But is this one fund or is this really two funds? Because you know that like the typical market terms for a fund of funds are in important ways very different than your typical market terms for a venture fund. Like the waterfalls are very different in a lot of ways. So that leaves a question to be answered that only the client can answer. But it's my job to walk them through it and think through it with them. You want to do two things in one fund, and that's like your heart is set on that. But that's going to be very confusing for the market. Like allocators have buckets for funds and fund of funds investments. They have buckets to allocate your venture investments. They're not going to know where to put you. And even if they're like not that sophisticated with allocating buckets, they're still not going to know what you are because you're doing two different things. So it's going to make it a confusing conversation with prospective investors if you try to meld these things together. Which economic model are you going to choose? The fund of funds model with its waterfall that typically does pay a preferred return and typically has a much lower carry interest versus a venture capital fund that typically does not pay a preferred return in the US and typically has a much higher carry rate, carry interest than a fund of funds. Do you want to kind of have a waterfall that just kind of split the baby in half. Like instead of having a 20% carried interest like a venture fund or a 10% carried interest like a fund of funds, we'll have a 15% carry. Do you want to do that, or do you want to have two different waterfalls within your fund and like allocate fund of funds deals to the waterfall that's fund of funds like, and venture fund deals to the waterfall that's venture fund like? Like, when we talk through that, or door number two is like split these things and have two different funds. So like that's an example. But I chose like fund of funds and venture funds. It could just have easily have been like, I'm raising a real estate fund for development, and I'm also raising a GP fund to raise my GP capital for my underlying, JVs, right? Can I do both in one fund, right? Like you probably could, but you're doing that two different economics and the same questions arise. You split the baby in half and, you're neither here nor there, or you have two different waterfalls, or you have two different funds. So, a lot of these different iterations of that. But I find that clients don't often have they're not really so set in their ways when they come. Like they may have ideas, which is great. I want them to have ideas. I don't want a client that's like, I haven't thought about this stuff at all. Like, what should I be doing? Right? That's not going to work either, right? Yeah. You have to have an open mindset. But you have to have some opinions, right? So they come with opinions, then we'll talk through. Yeah.
I mean, if they don't have initiative, they're not going to be working with either of our firms. So it's kind of how that's the litmus test. I'm not going to let you go without asking about technology, because who would I be if I didn't? So here's my perspective. And look, I'm novice with regard to legal tech and the developments therein. It seems like the legal work that get disrupted first is the commodity layer. Fair to say, templated docs, routine filings. But then you have good judgment, intuition, relationship capital. That's really hard to disrupt. So what's your opinion of everything going on right now? Is it changing how you guys run your show, how you interact with your clients? Just give me the unfiltered take on your view of technology in 2026.
First of all, I'm a Luddite. I'll be honest. Like, I don't know technology. I don't know. I'm like, ask my kids. Like, I need help with everything. But in the last, I would say 12 months, these two eyes have been open to AI in the legal industry in ways that's blowing my mind. I mean, I'm legitimately impressed. This old guy over here, I'm using AI every single day in work. It is making work so much more efficient. It really is. I can give you so many examples. It started out where I had a fund that was like a little of a unique type of fund, the strategy. And I wanted to address an aspect of their strategy with a risk factor in the PPM that I couldn't just pull off the shelf some other funds, right? So I asked AI to draft me this risk factor, and it did a great job. Okay. That's how it started out. Like, draft me a risk factor. I was like, wow, it did a great job. Now I'm using it in so many ways. As a first cut at drafting stuff, it does a great job. To summarize stuff, it does a great job. To compare stuff, it does a great job. It really does a great job. And like everything I've asked it to do, it's never, ever, ever the finished product. Never. But that first crack at gathering, at condensing, at summarizing, even at drafting, it does a really useful job. I can spend, and I've done this Sunday, I had something I wanted to draft. I spent an hour and a half with AI. I prompted it. It produced something. I read it. I actually read what it produced. I gave it constructive criticism, right? We went back and forth, just me and AI, hour and a half. I probably saved the client, I don't know, $10,000. Like, this was hours and hours of work. Last year, it would have been hours and hours of work that took me an hour and a half with AI. My mind was blown. It was tremendous. So what does that mean for law firms? That's a bigger question that's like beyond my pay grade. But I have a very strong view that This is a win-win. It's a win for law firms. It's a win for their clients. So similar to how a lot of things in the dynamic between a GP and the LPs is not actually adversarial. It's not actually adverse. It's not a zero-sum game. LPs and GPs can all win. Law firms and clients and fund managers can all win with AI. How? Isn't it a zero-sum game? We're still billing by time, right? The less time we bill because we use AI to make our time more efficient, the less money we make. So it's better for the clients and worse for the law firm. I just don't see it work that way. I think we can do more for more clients in the same amount of time. And our clients are getting quicker responses with meaty, well-developed documents. They're waiting less on the lawyer, and we're just helping more clients more efficiently. That's how I've seen it. That's how I've seen it. So like, I think it's great.
Yeah, look, I think there's an argument to be made that you're getting busy work off your plate, you're freeing up capacity to take on more business and do a better job at servicing those clients. And that's how we see it anyway. And there are some shops that don't, and they want a penny pinch, and that's fine. But we are not in that camp. You're not in that camp, and I'm glad to hear that. I guess final question: what did we miss today that people should be walking away from? We went through a number of different questions. We covered a lot of ground. You have the lovely Hollywood Hills backdrop, 2 buildings behind you. So thank you for that. You are a friendly neighbor of mine. But what did we miss today, Yoni?
I think, and maybe this segues off of this last 2 minutes that we talked about, technology and AI. I'm very bullish on my industry, the legal industry, your industry, the fund administration industry, and at the same time, very bullish on fund sponsors, emerging managers in the classical sense, in my sense of the growth-minded, thoughtful investment manager. Everyone is going to win, right? If everyone keeps this one thing in mind, okay? Relationship. That's what it is. I'm not afraid of AI. I'm not afraid of it one iota, because it will never produce a relationship. It won't. At least not yet. I don't know. Maybe one day it will. Okay. But like, my clients get on the phone with me. There's something there that's intangible. There is something there. There's chemistry, if I can say it like that. Chemistry. There's fun. There's minds meeting and growing. You can't get that from AI, right? So I would say everyone who's in our industry, the funds, alternative assets industry, whether as a thought partner like Juniper, Square, DLA Piper, whether you're hiring a firm like one of ours or anyone in this ecosystem, keep your eye on relationship above everything. Not on cost, although cost is important, right? Not on, I don't know, anything else that's quantifiable. Keep your eye on the intangible. And if that feels right to you, it's going to be a value add relationship. It's going to be long-term, and all will gain, all will prosper. I think that's the most important thing.
I'm with you. Well, the day that your hologram shows up for lunch instead of you, I'll know that you made it and that you're off the grid entirely and you've given up on the technology rush. So here we go.
Amazing.
Yoni, thank you so much. This has been fun. I'll see you around, good sir, and hope you have a great start to the summer.
Great to see you, neighbor. We'll talk to you soon.